All right, so let's get this party started. And I love the idea that we are having a Smart Water Wednesday future or feature release party. Uh,
Oh yeah.
and this is something that, for you listening at home, I have wanted to add to our Smart Water Wednesday lineups. This is something that I hear from our customers and from my water nerds out there that we are always adapting and listening to feedback, but sometimes it happens so fast that I need to do a better job keeping up with voicing the changes and letting people know kind of, even if they're nuanced, what we've done so they can use those upgrades to their advantage. So that is what we are going to do today. We are going to have my special guests, Bob Beers, our senior product manager, and Lance Elliott, our senior UX designer. Lance, can you tell me what UX stands for?
Uh, yeah, I was attempting to come up with a funny, but the X threw me there. It's user experience or user interface. So it's just essentially where buttons go.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that we have the two guys on the phone today or on the horn today that are really guiding the technology right at the forefront, or meeting with engineers, developing features, as well as listening to our customers and providing the right feedback that guides kind of the direction. So it's very exciting. Thank you guys for making time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely. Thanks for having us on, and likewise, we're excited to talk about these new features and new functionalities that we hear from the market, from people who are on the call. Bring that in, turn it into something, an actual feature, and then use this as a platform to talk about it and discuss it, and hopefully have more successes and get more feedback.
And more future release parties. Woo,
Exactly.
That's
I
right.
love it. So hopefully this will become a mainstay. Bob, before we get started, I want you to see Bronco Country. You are the
Yep.
first Bronco fan I've had on the show, so I had
What?
to,
That's terrible. I mean, I'm happy to be here and happy to be, a Bronco fan, but the first, that's just brutal.
Well, I have had some Colorado folks, but I don't know that they're Bronco fans, and I know that to be true about you.
Yep.
So let's get started. All right. So what brings us together today was the press release that came out on April 2nd, talking about how we have made some enhancements to both the WeatherTrack firmware and to the WeatherTrack mobile application that you guys are going to help us talk about. And I'm going to start off with Bob Beers, who's going to walk us through what just changed in our OptiFlow setup. We've done a bunch of shows on OptiFlow. In fact, Joe Jackson, who is in the audience today, was one of the special guests for that. And I'm excited to hear what you've added to OptiFlow, or the changes in the user experience to OptiFlow.
Yeah, for sure. This one, relative to some of the other releases we've had for OptiFlow over the last few years, it's relatively small, but I think it fills a fairly significant gap in the user workflow and user experience. And so with this newest release for V8.7 type firmware for OptiFlow, it enables a user, customer out in the field, to be able to go directly to the controller panel, unlock it, either with a mobile app or through the web, or if that controller is not currently connected because there's some kind of communication issue, they can unlock it directly from the panel. And then moving forward with 8.7, you can initiate manual station operation from the panel. So you can set your runtime, what stations you want to run, and then initiate that operation from the panel directly. So previously, we wouldn't allow that for controllers that were offline, with the concern being how it might affect the overall irrigation management or hydraulic management. But picking up enough concern from the field and as many requests from the field of, hey, I need to get water on the ground, I can't talk to this controller right now, we need to be able to run manual operations directly from the panel. So heard that loud and clear. That was something we wanted to fix, or not fix, but just fill and take a different approach to it. So we've enabled that feature. So you can now go to the panel, unlock it, and then initiate manual operations from it. We'd recommend that if you have a manager controller, and then the controller that you want to initiate manual runs from the panel on is a member controller, make sure to unlock the manual control or the manager first and put it into master valve override so that you can energize the hydraulic structure. Then go to your member controller, unlock it, and then you'll have an energized system that you can pull water from.
Yeah, make sure that master valve is open, right?
Yep. And then just be aware of what's going on the system. Otherwise, if your system's operational, you're in scheduled irrigation, other controllers are running, you could put yourself into a circumstance where you overtax the main line, you're pulling more off of it, and it might affect pressure. So just be aware of what's going on with your system. But really, we wanted to take the training wheels off in a sense. We think the users in the field, they're smart, they know what they're doing. There's probably a reason exactly why you're going to go to that controller, initiate the run on those specific stations so you know what's happening at the system and why you're going to do it. So we just kind of want to take the training wheels off and put the power back into your hands to be able to do that.
All right, I've got a couple of pieces of feedback for you. Gary Collins gave you a shout out and said that this was a much needed feature. Joe asks, will you be able to do a master valve override at the panel? If it's the manager controller, will you be able to go and do the master valve override button push, or is that something that still has to happen from the app?
Yeah, so no changes there. So it'll behave just as it did before. So it'd be from the app or the web. Yeah. So, and then for Gary was actually one of our beta customers for this exact feature late last fall. So he was one of the very first customers with OptiFlow to get his hands on this OptiFlow manual from the panel functionality. So he was a great user, great feedback. So shout out to Gary for that help.
Thank you.
And
Gary.
then Joe followed up that with a question, if that manager is offline, do we have a recommended process for that?
Not with the overall system. I think it's kind of the trouble with having that kind of networked solution when you have controllers sharing a main line. I mean, ultimately, you wouldn't be able to override it from the controller panel directly or from the web because you can't talk to it.
So what I would do as a user is just start irrigation on one of those stations, right? The manager controller will know to turn on the master valve there, and that will at least open up the master valve and allow you to work through that. So good things that we will follow up on, Joe. Good questions. One thing I did want to ask you, Bob, can you very quickly describe how a user would unlock the panel if they are offline? You said that was possible, but that's not something a lot of users know.
Yeah. So if you don't have a pin, so you go to the controller panel, you press the run button, and it's kind of hard to visualize it without, a backup display, but you'd go to the controller panel, you press the run button, and this is going to pull up a new screen, new menu. Then you push the right arrow button, and that's going to pull up what we call the maintenance mode screen. And that'll prompt you to enter your password. And so the cursor will be right underneath the first digit, and then you'll be able to see how you can increase or decrease the number of values based off of there. And so you can scroll through the numbers 0 through 9 until you have the right one, and then you press the right arrow to go to the next digit, right arrow to the next digit, right into the next digit.
How do you get that code?
Yep. So to get your PIN, first of all, you can get it from the mobile app or from OptiFlow in the web. So you can go to Unlock Controller. It'll give you your PIN if it's not able to communicate to the controller directly. So you get a PIN number from the mobile app that you can get on your cell phone, go to that controller panel, unlock it from the panel face, and then use that PIN code in the OptiFlow controller, and then it'll unlock those features. So it's a pretty straightforward process. You can do it in less than a minute.
Yeah, it's a lot like the unlock process already. Like you go to unlock it from WeatherTrack Mobile. If the controller is online, you can just unlock it. If the controller is offline, it will give you that 4-digit code that you can enter one screen to the right of the run screen, right? The maintenance mode screen. That's awesome. All right, so I will leave the chat open for questions for Bob, and I will transfer over to Lance. Lance, yes. You have more than one bullet point that you got to cover, so I'm going to give you more time. Look at all this. You've
bullets.
been busy, my
Oh my
friend.
goodness.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna bounce this over to you.
Oh,
Can
thanks.
you
Yeah.
tell
So
us a little
like,
bit about what we're looking at with the update?
totally. So like, Bob said, the update really affected. Let me share my screen. How about I do that?
That would be awesome.
Let's do that. Desktop 3. Um, so this is a good way to look at it when you think about everything that was affected by this recent update. And like Bob said, there might not be a lot of bells and whistles, but some in this update, as far as kind of eye candy, but it really is this kind of foundational update that is for us to build upon as we've been wanting to work towards improving the whole communication between everything that all the weather track uh, stops along the journey, I guess. And so
Right,
in
when
this
you're talking
case,
about the communication, there's so many
right,
steps involved that we just
yes,
want
yeah, it's funny in that, well, and amazing to think that what and how far something travels from when you go to say station 4 and hit start, what has to happen in seconds, right? And so little tweaks are what we've worked with 3.3 and with that kind of pairs with the firmware of 8.7 and also 7.11 for the Pro 3s and LCs, is that each step in this journey now is just being optimized. And so you think about the cell phone and you hit the start and it goes across the cellular network to our servers, that goes across the cellular network somewhere potentially across the entire country, who knows, to the controller. And then the controller will receive that command and that says turn on station 4. And so the controller will do that, but then the controller needs to say, I have done it. So it will send that message back through to the, so then the app then receives the confirmation, and then you'll see that countdown begin. And so we want to make that process as quick as possible, right? Everything about that goes same, but there are elements sometimes that are just out of our control, right? Be it infrastructure, cellular networks, and other things. And we do have antennas and ways to help improve that, especially when we're looking at when I'm speaking of the controllers. But so this was really great in that we were able to refine these stages and look at very closely how everything spoke to each other and make that more efficient. And it will, I like to think of it as a foundation because it's just something we will grow on, especially as the season is kicking off. We're watching things very closely, the performances between all of these that you see on the screen, and um, with the thought of making sure we're refining that along the way. So
yeah. And so with this new app update, it provides not only the infrastructure to support that, but the visibility at each step for us to really drill in. So if our
yeah,
users are having communication or lag issues, we can really much quicker identify where the failure is happening. Yes?
yeah, there's it's pretty magical, but we can see where the breakdown is if there's a breakdown, and uh, there are ways to do that. Now it's not it's something that we can kind of forensically do. So you think of it as if there's an issue that's reoccurring and we're able to kind of go in, and if we know when something, the time of day, the attempt was made, and some specifics that can be looked at and reviewed to see where in that in the future we're going to be working on a way for the app itself to communicate that. So these stages that you see here on the screen, we will be introducing when you do say start a station from station, say turn on station 4. If there's a breakdown in one of these stages, and that station doesn't come on, we're going to work on ways to help better communicate that to you so that you can be able to uh, at least understand why, and then hopefully even be able to do something to improve that.
So from a training perspective, when I talk to WeatherTrack users, what I teach them to do is if they have repeated communication issues, to document that with customer service, to send the time and date and the device serial number and all that to customer
Absolutely.
service so we can get it on the record. And right now, this provides them better infrastructure to drill down on that.
Yes. Yeah. I think I like to look at it this way. We have this, in the Matrix, remember, what was the gentleman's name? Dozer,
Dozer, yes.
right? Who could just read the code. So we have people like that. We have Dozer at HydroPoint who with what you just said can look in the matrix and kind of see exactly where things are not happening and shed light into a good solution to the situations.
I love it. That's awesome. All right. Good stuff. So, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So another thing that, and I put this here because I thought it'd be fun to share. We accommodated the ability to display longer site controller and station names, which seems to be, if you were looking at a list of features, you'd be like, that's the most boring feature, but it isn't. And I think and I thought I'd share with you why it's exciting being able to do that. And this just goes back to, like you're saying, with customers being able to provide great input and how we learn from them, not only because the need to display longer site controller and station names came from a brilliant customer who has a really unique way of doing something that I thought I'd share, because I think others that are watching might benefit from that. So, well, like I say, all roads lead back to sitemap, but sitemap is such a powerful tool, and then the more people use it, I think the more that's realized. And in that, of course, you're placing assets on a map based on their physical location on the site. And we introduced a asset called the station location asset, which is essentially was created because we know that the location of the valve is not always where the watering occurs. So if the valve location and you say bled on that valve, or there's a likelihood, at least in systems I've been to in my past, where in some cases they are in the most illogical, like it's coming on a football field away somewhere, but it doesn't necessarily mean that where the valve is where the station is. So
finding what the water turns on is way easier than finding the valve itself.
Yeah, so it's great to locate the valve. That's enormously important and a huge time saver, probably one of the most valuable assets you can place on sitemap. But if you're out doing a wet check, it doesn't help you if you see this valve here, if you expect actual spray heads to pop up, and that's not necessarily the case. So the location asset was invented. Another customer, great feedback. So we could place a symbol that you knew, if you're in that location of that blue dot there, that's where you would expect that station's watering to happen. In the future, of course, we'll build upon this. We can predict that we'll be able to actually create more geometry around the stations and other things. But this is a great, get you 90% of the way there, probably 100% of the time. But so the thing I thought I would share was why the long names matter and how they relate to the station location asset.
While you load up, can you tell me? I know that the old limitation was 24 characters for a station name.
It's not as much the characters increase, but in the app itself, being able to display all of those characters, it was interesting in that they typically were always used. So if they were, you'd get like a ... kind of a yada yada yada.
Right.
And there's more. If it reached a certain character count. But because of learning from how our customers have began to take advantage of all those characters you mentioned, Ben, that in naming things differently, it really, I think, lends to why the station location asset, and let me go to the sitemap on this demo
Joe has
site I
his
have.
under controller pass.
Yes.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. So it is the idea that if you're walking, since station location assets are actually identifying the location of where watering occurs, that we no longer do we need to name stations the way we did for decades, which would be at worst station 1 or no name, or our best attempt at that moment in time to somehow creatively create a way for someone to find it in the name itself with some descriptor. Shrubs east of building by southwest wall, slightly north of that, and to your right if you're facing west, right? And I would go, you'd see those on controlladors and stuff. I was terrible at that. I mean, like, where's north? I don't. So, but if a station location asset is identifying the location, could you not use then the name for something more useful
Yeah,
besides
now that
trying
it's on
to
the map,
describe
we
it?
don't need to describe where it's coming up in the field.
You don't have to describe it, right? And so the idea now of naming with meaning and these, the thing is, it could be anything you want it to be, whatever fits your company and your workflow. Customers I thought was just brilliant, and I've just taken something a bit different. And again, this is not how you should do it. It's just as an example of what you could do. But think of it in ways of code where you're now, instead of describing the location, you're now can put so much information packed into that name. We see now at the top example of shrub sprays 1800s, a 2-inch PB, and program A. That tells you a bunch before you ever turn it on, as long as that station location asset, of course, is there to interact with and potentially, as I bring that up there. Now this control I have turned off, but you can see there's the name as well. And this is a shrub spray heads 1800s 1-inch DVF and on program A.
Ooh, we see something else that was involved in the update there too.
That's right, a station number. So we know that's 22.
Love that.
Exactly. So that you can see though, but take it a step further and think of a station name as something that doesn't have to be once named always stays that way. Think about using characters to communicate to other people on site. Maybe put an X in front of the name temporarily, meaning don't turn this on. If I'm scrolling through the list of stations and see a station start with the letter X and a dash, I'm thinking whatever that means in our company, we've defined it as, that is, I'll abide by that, right? So you think of grass, rotors, I-20 stainless steels, a 1.5-inch PGA on program C. It says so much that I think takes the companionship between the location asset and a new naming convention. If in addition, of course, not even thinking about all the benefit of the other things of sitemap, would just be a huge improvement. I imagine to my workflow, if I went back in time and had these tools, I would be thrilled to be able to kind of start renaming and rethinking the way that yeah. So
look on that station naming convention with fresh eyes, right? Like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
on the map, it really does change the game on what we can use that naming convention for. And you're spot on. If I knew before I hit that button that it was going to be spray heads coming up, that makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Right? If you get a call out that they're describing based on their description, you can deduce that they're talking about the seals on 1800s are bad and they're spraying. They don't say it, the name brand or anything like that, but you're like, okay, I think that's what they're describing. And that's you look at the station and say, yep, I see that there's 1800s on here. or seeping valve, they describe something of that nature. You already know, make sure I need to get that PB solenoid versus the DVF solenoid. Diaphragm, but it could be very helpful, I think. But the nice thing about it is it could be anything, right? Yeah, I would love to see how other people invent and come up with something that's useful to their company and their workflow.
Absolutely.
So this is just me making up something kind of inspired by smarter people, smarter customers who were doing a great job of creating their own kind of code. But in the future, as we are working in WeatherTrack Central, with one day we'll be able to share and show this our new manual page. But I also think about searching, right? So if you wanted to filter a search for all shrub stations, you just do SRB and there's your list, right? So
nice.
there's that as well. So I could ramble, but that's, I think, what.
And I think that's for our water nerd crew that watches this webinar. I think that's a gem of a takeaway, right? A new way to look at an existing feature, something new and different that you can use.
I agree. I think it wasn't. It seems like when I saw that, and then just thinking about it and having presented this in the past, I thought if there's anything that really is a super powerful, useful tip, it would be this kind of combo between this little orange icon and having the ability to see more on the screen. And just I think coming into a new season of wet checks and all that, this is a grand opportunity to put these on every site and be thinking about maybe not going with compass directions.
With the old standby, it's actually going to have to change the way that I train, because honestly, I'm still training this way.
You're right. It's absolutely. It's funny when I go into these, when I'm mocking up screens and I have to just kind of make up stations. I still do. I just make up courtyard, west, grass. Yeah, it's just such a habit of imagining station names as being that maybe we can think 15 years from now that we won't. That's a thing of the past.
That's awesome. All right, so we are running thin on time here. And I have a question that I ask all of my guests. And I forgot to warn you about this, so this is going to come as a surprise. Who wants to face the question first? Bob Beers?
Sure, bring it on. I'll take the bullet, and then Lance can have time to think about his response.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so what I'm asking all of the HydroPoint people that come on the show, what is your favorite WeatherTrack feature? One feature that you think water nerds would love to play with or should know about?
Yeah, I think for general purposes, general market, I think OptiFlow is probably one of the coolest. Single button click, let WeatherTrack OptiFlow do all the crazy math for you, and then you don't have to worry about it. I mean, that takes hours and hours to do it by hand, and it'll do it in one button click. I think for all users, I think our scheduled master valve override, schedule learn flow, scheduled event pause functionalities are huge time savers. And then our batch commands. So send down a ton of information in like 2 button clicks. So, percent adjust on all these station groups you can create, huge time savers.
You get extra credit, Bob. I asked for one, you gave me 3. That was awesome.
You can't give the product guy 1. All right, I got to talk about
he stole all mine.
But to your credit, those were 3 new ones. Those were 3 that hadn't been mentioned by people in the past. So you're good.
That's those are great. And
Lance,
I can't help but I spend too much time with sitemap to not think that to see the benefit and the power of that, in addition to where it's going to go. And that, yeah, so I think we worked with Joe, I'm looking at your name on this list here, in Sprinkler Supply a few weeks back, and got the pleasure of seeing some site maps from customers just out from up in the Utah area. And it was just wonderful to see that, see how it's being used by different people, and the magnitude of assets that have been placed, the time and effort that was taken to do that shows that they saw and see the value themselves to go through putting all of those there. And I mean hundreds in some cases, and that might be an exaggeration, but might not. But it's great to see that. And I think over time, as this becomes more and more popular, we will be we'll just knowing that we helped people not have to go through the frustration of finding these dang things over and over again, or just think about that new employee that shows up and has access to all these sites with all of those assets already, and they're asked to do something. They'll never know a day especially if they're young, what it was like to have gone through actually finding all that.
Searching under the bushes and the overgrown valve boxes.
I just look on the map. It's all, you mean you don't have a map? Right. So
awesome. And just so you know, when I asked Brady Pitcher this same question, that's what he said. So
oh, nice. Yeah.
Brady Pitcher gave you a shout out and you didn't even know it.
Ah, that's good. Well,
all right. That was awesome, guys. Thank you for playing along. I am going to go back to my PowerPoint just to bring us closure. Of course, we are always here to support. If you need our support resources, we have them online. We have them live at the customer support line, and we have training resources galore. Contact me if you need help with any of the training support. And next week, I'm excited to have a good friend of mine, Mark Hurd. He will, from the Denver Public Schools, he'll be joining me to talk about how to use WeatherTrack to reduce maintenance costs. He tells a great story about calculating how much a truck roll costs him to send a tech out to a site, and how WeatherTrack helps him reduce the number of truck rolls. So I'm excited for you guys to hear his story. Oh, I got the date wrong. That's supposed to be next week, not this week. But other than that, thank you all for joining, and we will see you next week. Bob, Lance, thank you guys for making time. Anybody you want to give a shout out to before we close out?
No, just everybody. Thank you for joining, and thanks for spending time with us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. All right. We'll see you next week.
Take care. Bye.